All right, folks, welcome. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Emmett. I'm the announcer here. Just wanted to introduce Mike Guthrie. Mike Guthrie is the lead developer at Nagios Enterprises and has developed new features and add-ons for Nagios Core, Nagios XI, and Nagios Fusion. So go ahead, give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. I think based on the few sessions I'm seeing in attendance, I think it's corporate nap time all around. I'm wondering, as we're on day 3 here, but it's a small group, so we should have room for discussion at the end if you guys want to talk about stuff too. So what we're going to talk about today is Nagios Fusion 2012 specifically. Nagios Fusion came out back in 2010. It was just a very basic central dashboard for viewing multiple Nagios servers, whether they are Nagios XI or Nagios Core. The initial release was fairly limited in its feature set. It just basically combined tactical overviews from all the Nagios servers and provided a unified way to log into any of the servers. So for the XI servers, when you logged into Fusion, you are automatically logged into XI. And then for the core servers, if you wanted to drill down and see more details in any of the core servers, it was just a one-time basic authentication for the core servers. We had several different discussions with different customers in the last year, and one demo that we were doing in particular, we were discussing with a customer, and they proposed several different ideas with Fusion, and Ethan and I got to talking about where we could take it. And for me personally, this is probably my favorite project to work on, actually, because I'm very much a front-end and a user interface developer, and I love doing data visualizations. And so for me, Fusion is by far my favorite project to work on. And so the goals of Nagios Fusion is to act as a central looking glass for all of your Nagios servers. The idea being, if you wanted to have 2, 3, 4, even 10 or more Nagios servers, you can do that, and you can tie them all together and see aggregations of all that information in one place. It's a read-only view, but it basically just it pulls the data, it brings it all into one place. So if you have to manage multiple Nagios servers in some sort of a distributed environment, you can do that through using Nagios Fusion. As I mentioned, Fusion has a unified login, particularly with XI. You log into Fusion, it logs you into a session for all of your XI servers. It does aggregate the data across all of your machines, and there's several different visualizations as well, which becomes important the larger your environment gets. The more and more data you get, viewing it all in one place, you need to somehow summarize it or visualize it. Or aggregate it somehow in order to see it in a readable fashion. And that way, from there, you can drill down and see what you need. As I mentioned, it works for Core and Nagios XI. And part of the goal of Nagios Fusion is to simplify the not-so-simple process of distributed monitoring. There's several different models that can be used for how you do distributed monitoring with Nagios. This tries to present a very simple, straightforward solution for distributed monitoring, and tries to ease the learning curve for that a little bit. And it's a little bit different model than, say, maybe distributing your checks using DNX or Mod-Gearman or some of the other models out there. It basically is it's a central viewing model. So you've got many servers, you just view aggregations in one place. The other thing that it does to simplify distributed monitoring is that Fusion will work with Nagios XI or Nagios Core right out of the box without any add-ons or extra configurations. So if you already have any kind of Nagios server running, you can basically just tie it right into Fusion. It'll work right out of the box without any additional configurations. And then a key feature we really worked on for 2012 is just user customization. Each user who's in Fusion is potentially going to want to look at something very different than the next person. And so what we did is that in Nagios Fusion 2012, everything is a dashlet, and you can essentially build as many dashboards as you want, put whatever dashlets you want on it, and those are going to be specific per user. So if you've got 20 different Fusion users, they just basically they build their own dashboards and add whatever dashlets they want to see. So whatever items are most important for them to pay attention to, they're going to have the pages set up to see what's relevant to them. So the scope of Nagios Fusion, we wanted to try to define the scope a little bit more as we moved into the 2012 version, and really just kind of maintain that idea of a central viewing dashboard. It is read-only, so Fusion does not do any monitoring of its own. It doesn't do any alerting. And part of that is because Nagios, whether it be Core or XI, is already doing that. It's already, all of that logic is already there, and it's already doing a good job. It's going to do it much better than what Fusion can, so we're not going to try and recreate things that are already on the actual Nagios servers themselves. So the focus of Fusion is read-only, and it's aggregation, visualization, and summarization of your data. And so just kind of gives you high-level viewing. So it doesn't do, for example, like availability reporting, things like that, because both Nagios Core and XI, they already do that. And so we're not doing that level of, say, reporting or alerting or monitoring in Fusion. We're just viewing data. We added quite a few new visualizations and so forth in the 2012 version, so it's a lot more feature-rich than the 2010 version. Now, as I mentioned, we want to try to simplify the idea of distributed monitoring with Nagios Fusion. There's, as I mentioned, there are several different models for distributed monitoring. One I would propose is going to be probably different than a lot of what's out there right now. I think partly because Fusion is moving in a direction that I don't think any other product is really doing the same way right now. And I would just propose a new idea to consider with distributed monitoring, that having more consolidated Nagios instances is not necessarily a bad thing. Depending on how you want to break it up, you can have a separate Nagios server by geographic location or even by team. So for example, you could even have, let's say you've got a very large environment with several different teams that all need to use Nagios. With Fusion, there would be nothing stopping you from having one Nagios server is dedicated to the database team, another Nagios server dedicated to the network or like the infrastructure team for switches, routers, things like that. And you can have a server by team or by building, by location, whatever you need to do. We actually include a Fusion license if when people purchase a site-wide Nagios XI license, to where they need to have numerous installs of XI. We actually ship Fusion with that. We just include it for free with a site-wide license, so that people can have as many XI installs as they want to have, and then they can just tie it all together with Fusion and manage it from one place. And so, I would argue that being a developer myself, I love to compartmentalize things and have just a nice clear scope of different things. So if you can set up your environment where you would have just a clear defined scope of a Nagios server, whether it be, this Nagios server is responsible for monitoring everything inside of this particular building, or say this particular aspect of the network, whether it be databases or switches and so forth. You can compartmentalize it, and then that way, let's say, and you can even assign your teams differently too. So you could say, all right, database team, you are in charge of the database Nagios server. So if you need to add new things, you add it to that server, you do what you need to do, you set up your alerting on that server. And it gets a little bit into personnel management as well, but again, it compartmentalizes it. So that way, for example, the database team, they're not going to mess anything up for the switch and router team or something like that. You can compartmentalize it that way. And this is a little bit different method than what most people are doing right now, but I would propose it would also be, depending on your environment, for some people this could actually work really, really well. And so you could localize it and just have a defined scope for each one of your Nagios servers and then tie them all together with Fusion. Another advantage of this is that if you've got them compartmentalized, if one server is down or is having a problem, that's not messing up monitoring for everybody else in your infrastructure. And this does just simplify and clarify a scope, whether it be, even one server being in charge of a host group or service group. If those groups are very large, you could do it that way as well. And I would also propose with this method, you're not actually using any more boxes than just a large single Nagios instance. Where, say, if somebody, I've got an example here. Let's just take just a typical example of somebody who needs to do a large implementation of Nagios. We'll say, 10, 15,000 checks or something like that, with a variation in terms of what they're monitoring. So you've got your master Nagios server, you've got a couple of workers, whether it be DNX or Mod Gearman that you're using to distribute checks. And let's say it's either an XI install or somebody needs the database backend to create more advanced reports. So we'll partner NDO utils with that as well. If you've got each of those spread across several machines, you're still at 5 boxes when this is all done. At the end of the day, hardware-wise, you're not any worse off having just plain 5 different Nagios servers. You still, if you're doing it on physical hardware, you've still spent the same amount on hardware. But also, if you're using virtual servers, you're still using 5 VMs, and you're still managing 5 VMs. And so, proposing doing just maybe smaller and more instances of Nagios. Ultimately, you're probably not going to use any more machines than you would otherwise. It's just that you're going to have a focused scope for each one of your Nagios servers. And as I mentioned, for simplification, this works with just a vanilla core or XI with no add-ons. No additional ports need to be opened. It communicates over HTTP or HTTPS to fetch the data. The other thing, too, is Fusion, as far as hardware requirements, Fusion is very, very low overhead because it's just read-only. It's not doing any monitoring. You can have a Fusion server that's a single-core processor with a gig of RAM, and you're good to go. If you want to put it on a VM, that's fine. It's not going to have a problem. Even if you've got even if it's overseeing 20 Nagios servers, it's still not going to have a problem in terms of the resource usage. So, because it's pretty low overhead in terms of what it's doing. A little bit about how Fusion is working in 2012. This is different than the 2010 version. We found the limitation of 2010 was just that it was grabbing data kind of on the fly from each of the servers, and we found just if people had a lot of servers or maybe they had a proxy they had to go through, some of the load times for the dashlets were kind of sluggish upon the initial page load. So we went for a little bit different approach in 2012, and it actually came with some additional benefits in doing that. So the way it works in 2012 is that Fusion, it actually runs on a subsystem process that at regular intervals, it will actually poll each server for the tactical data, bring it to itself, and cache it locally. And so that way you're not doing as much performance impact to your child servers. If anybody's in an environment that has a lot of Nagios users, you'll probably know whether it's core or XI, if you have a lot of people using the front end at the same time, there's going to be a noticeable impact on the machine as far as the traffic that's creating. The core interface has to parse the status file and the objects file when somebody accesses those CGIs. If you've got 10 users all doing that at the same time, it's a fair amount of CPU usage on that machine, and you want to try and keep those machines freed up to monitor. And XI, it's the same way, maybe even a little bit more so because XI uses AJAX updates, and so if you've got 10 users all using the XI server at once, it's a fair amount of Apache activity on that machine. So what Fusion does is that instead of making separate requests for every single user, you could have 50 users using Fusion at the same time, and it's still only going to pull each of the servers one time every, say every 30 seconds, for example, and that actually kind of reduces the load on each of the child servers underneath it. So, and I had this question actually come up from a user who they said literally they did have on average 50 members of their team that might be using an XI interface at any given time, and they said they were definitely able to notice the traffic load because of that many people interacting with the interface and so forth. Whereas for them, the appeal with Fusion was that if they're looking at Fusion most of the time, the traffic on the child servers is pretty minimal. As far as scalability, adding a new server into Fusion literally is about a 2-step process. It's very, very simple, and you pretty much give it the address and the authentication credentials that you want to use. Know that the credentials that you use, the Nagios permissions will be honored. So whatever credentials you enter in, as your global credentials, every user is going to have access to that list of hosts or services. And we are going to do some more work on that probably later this year. But as far as the data fetch for each server, that's going to use a master set of credentials for now. So as I mentioned, uses HTTP or HTTPS to pull the data. And it's just a simple web front-end add. And I'll actually demonstrate this here with a video. And so you'll see here, I've just got, this is a sample Fusion dashboard of a home page here. Just a couple different dashboards here. Service health summary. And this is just calculating statistics for the different hosts and service states. And this one actually being service states. And so you can see, and you can actually turn these data sets off and on. So if you only want to view unhandled problems or critical or warning and so forth, the graph will rescale. So you can actually see across several servers, what the counts are for the different states. Got top alert producers dashlet and a few status summary dashlet, and we'll show those off just a little bit more. But for now, I'll just quickly show. I'll demonstrate with this video just adding a new server. So I'm just going to access the admin menu, click on Manage Fused Servers, and I've got four servers in there right now. I'm going to click Add New Server, and I'm going to temporarily hijack Scott Wilkerson's XI box for this demonstration. And I punch in his IP address, and then just the external, the web URL for his XI server. And in the event that I forget that it's Scott's XI box, yeah, I'll just label. We keep all of our XI servers on an ESX server, and I'll just punch in some notes for this particular server in case I forget my details about it. I click Add, and you'll see it in the list there. And then I go to the Configure menu, and let me quick pause on this page for just one moment. As I mentioned, the subsystem poller that runs for Fusion, the way it works is that if there's an active session in Fusion, it will use what's called an active polling interval. So if anybody's logged into Fusion, it will poll each server every 30 seconds. If nobody's in it, it will use what's called a passive interval, and so it will poll like once every 5 minutes. So it kind of just tries to reduce load on child servers if nobody's in it. And currently we don't make use of the passive interval at the moment, but eventually we're going to use that for graphing and statistical data and things like that. Those are features that will be developed later. But then, so as far as defining server credentials, I'll click that here for my Configure menu. All right, so it's loading each of my different credentials for my different boxes. For most of these, I'm logged in as Nagios admin. Enter my credentials, and it will actually verify the credentials on the fly as this page loads. So it's going one by one through each of these and just making sure that the credentials are good. So the credentials passed. And then I'm going to go back to my home dashboard. And you can see here now that I have Scott's XI server, who's got wonderful server health at the moment, a lot of services that all are in perfect shape at the moment. Actually, well, I'll dive into more detail on these specific dashlets, but the Fuse status summary is a dashlet that actually aggregates all the totals across all servers. And so if I click on the OK services, for example, it'll give me a pop-up so I can actually drill down to the particular machine and see the breakdown by server. So you see here, these are Scott's OK services on his XI machine. And that is all that it takes to add a new Nagios server, whether it be core or XI. It's the same process, so it takes about 60 seconds to add a new Nagios server into Fusion. All right. So some of the available dashlets in Nagios Fusion, one of the ones that you saw there was a fused status summary. It's the same kind of thing you'd see in XI or core, where it just gives you the totals broken down by state, whereas these are aggregated totals that if you click on, it gives you a pop-up of the breakdown by server. And so from there, if you want to see If I want to see just the warning services, across all machines, I'll click on that pop-up, and then I can actually drill down to see an individual server if I want to. Tactical overview is just, again, a compact view of the tactical overview from each server, just built into a dashlet. Recent alerts is an aggregated list of all alerts that have gone out in the last 2 hours across all servers, and you can sort and filter that list. And then a couple of visualizations would be just the host and service health, which was the bar graph that you guys saw a few moments ago. Again, and it's interactive, so you can turn data sets off and on to, if you wanted to just drill down and only see critical services, you could do that. There's an alert histogram, so if you want to track across all of your servers, maybe if there's a particular time of day that a lot of alerts are going out on one or more machines, that would show up in that in a histogram. And then there's a couple of XI-specific features, just because the XI has a pretty decent web API, so there's a few things for like individual hosts or services. So if you wanted to actually pull in a graph from the Graph Explorer into Fusion, for example, if you wanted to watch a particular service's performance metrics in Fusion, you can pull in single performance graphs into a Fusion dashboard if you want. Same thing for a host group or service group summary dashlet, which just gives a nice compact view. Again, you can pull that into Fusion. A couple these ones that are XI only, these are the exception to the polar. These actually, because they're smaller amounts of data, they will actually grab on the fly. So you will be getting very fresh data in Fusion for these. But the performance overhead for them is minimal to the point where we're not terribly concerned about the need to cache them, because it's usually only for either a single host or a select group of hosts. And the performance overhead is pretty small for those. We also, it's a pretty basic implementation, but if you use Nagios Business Process Intelligence, or BPI, we do have a BPI dashlet that you can actually view the status of all your business processes in Fusion as well. So let's actually take a look at, we're going to create a new dashboard in this next video. So again, this is the home dashboard. Now you'll see here the home menu this is the home menu in Nagios Fusion. This is actually, the home page is the only one that's there by default. Every other page after that is a page that the user creates for themselves. So essentially they kind of build their own interface, and they're going to see what they want to see. So we're going to create a new dashboard here in just a moment. And we'll show you here, this is another example dashboard. I've got the business processes pulled in from 2 different servers, so I can view those, as well as recent alerts pulled into this page as well. And I can move these around and arrange this page however I want to, and then pin my dashlets down. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add a new dashboard here in just a moment. And I'm feeling important today, so I'm going to name this my executive summary dashboard. So I open this up, and of course it's blank right now. There's no dashlets on it, so let's add a few dashlets. And so I do like the view status summary, because it just gives me the total aggregation just in a very compact view. It doesn't take up a lot of space. We'll scroll down a little bit. I'm going to add recent alerts, because I want to know what's going out for alerts across all my servers. Scroll down a little bit more. Let's see, what are we adding? And I'm going to grab the top alert producers, which again is just an aggregation of the top alert producers. It grabs, I believe, the top 10 alert producers from every single server for the last 24 hours. And then no dashboard's complete without a visualization, so I'm going to add just a host health graph to my executive summary dashboard. So now let's go see. At the moment, they're all layered on top of each other, so after you build a dashboard, you have to take just a little bit of time to resize them. Rats. That was the thing I was trying not to do today. So, all right, so essentially, there wasn't too much left to that. So essentially, once you add all the dashlets to a page, they will be essentially kind of layered on top of each other. You drag the dashlets around. You can resize them to fit your dashboard. You just basically arrange the page to look like whatever you want to pack onto that dashboard. And then one other thing too, if anybody's used XI, you've probably seen this before, but there's this little blue triangle up here that if you click on that triangle, you can actually full screen your dashlet. It will use up the entire browser window. So if you want more space to look at it or arrange dashlets, you can do that. But essentially, that's all that's involved. It again, just takes a few minutes to create a new dashboard, a new page, to show whatever information that you want to see for it. It's pretty user-friendly and straightforward. Doesn't take very long to set up. So as I mentioned, the home menu, it consists of completely user-defined dashboards, so they can create the menu to be and the interface to be whatever they want it to be. So if somebody has a particular focus for machines they want to watch or metrics they want to watch on their servers, they can have their home page and their different dashboards are going to look completely different than the next user that comes along. A couple of other interesting things that can be done with Fusion would be you can actually compare performance metrics from multiple servers. We've had people ask, is there a way that I can actually watch what my content load time is from if I want to compare it from the West Coast versus the East Coast. Well, if you happen to have Nagios servers on both sides of the country and you want to compare what your load times are from both ends of the country, you can actually grab the performance graphs from both Nagios servers, bring them into Fusion, and actually look at them right next to each other to compare it that way. So same thing for host or service status. Like if you are keeping an eye on connectivity from multiple geographic locations, you can have just an individual host or service status bar dashlets, and you can actually just watch those from Fusion as well. And then starting in the 1.3 version of Fusion, which actually will hopefully I'll be able to push that out in the next 2 weeks or so, administrators will actually be able to create and deploy dashboards to their users, and then from there, if they want to sync them on a regular basis, they can actually do that. So if admins want to have all of their users using 2 or 3 of the same dashboards, they can do that and push them out to their users. Is anybody currently using Fusion at the moment, or have at least played around with it? Okay, 2 guys. So all right, so mostly new users. Another thing that's in Nagios Fusion is called the views page, and views are just it's a custom rotation of different URLs essentially. It's a completely user-defined list. So again, every user sets up their views rotation to be whatever they want. If your page uses session authentication or even basic authentication, because the use of iframes, it will actually preserve an authentication after initially logging in. So let's say if I wanted to rotate through several pages, whether it be multiple pages through my Nagios servers or even an external ticketing system or some other external monitoring solution. If you want to bring that into Fusion, you just add the URL for it into the views rotation, and it will rotate through, and you'll actually essentially have whatever external web application you need to look at brought inside of Fusion. And so it's pretty flexible that way. You can essentially tie together whatever you need to do in Fusion. If you want to bring everything to one place and manage it from Fusion, you can do that. So as I mentioned, any page from any child server can be included in the rotation, and that's without an additional login, but you can also tie into another management app. So if you have something that you use specifically for network management, things like that, you can tie that in. And I'll actually demonstrate with a video here. I'm going to try really hard not to click to the next slide in this one. So you're seeing here, it's kind of on fast forward at the moment, so it's on the fastest speed for rotation. So this, for example, is just a Nagios XI Operations Center component. It shows all unhandled problems, and I actually have that for 2 different servers. So if I want to watch all of the operation screens for all of my XI servers, I can do that. And then I'll click to continue here. I can bring pages that are just internal to Fusion into this list as well. This is a Fusion page here. And the next item in the rotation is actually a Nagios Incident Manager. I've logged into Incident Manager from this views rotation, and so now I can actually view all of my open tickets from within Fusion. And if I want to pause the rotation and interact with some of my tickets from here, I can do that. Pardon just a moment for the rotation. And again, this is just my home dashboard on my actual XI box. So again, you can bring in pretty much anything that's a web page, whether it be a web application or so forth, you can bring that into the views rotation and access it from Fusion. So it really is a super, super easy way to tie a whole bunch of tools together if you need to manage everything from one place. Again, just the idea is central viewing, central management, all from Fusion. A couple of other things, and actually I developed this after I wrote the presentation. So as I mentioned, deployable dashboards will be available probably in the next 2 weeks with our 1.3 release. Another one that's been requested by multiple users is that they want a centralized Knox Center component. If anybody's used Nagios XI, our Knox Center component is basically an aggregation of all unhandled problems with the most recent problems populating to the top of the page. Somebody wants that in Fusion across, several people have wanted that in Fusion across all of their servers, so that they can just basically blow it up on one big screen. They want to see all the problems on all machines, and they want to see it on one screen. So that one will be coming hopefully fairly soon here for Fusion as an add-on component. A couple other things I've kind of bounced around as ideas. A lot of these are just feature possibilities. Most of what we develop comes from user requests, so it kind of depends what level of interest people have in some of these ideas. So, but you can also do, we might do something with Nagios server metrics where it will actually graph and show the, for example, the check latency across all servers or the CPU load across all of just your Nagios servers. So if you can actually use it to make sure each individual Nagios server is healthy, is running okay, and the checks are happening on time. That's another component on the development radar. So we do intend to do some more work with actual user login credentials. So the data fetch will be, right now the data fetch is pulled from one login credential, but what I intend to do sometime here in the next year is to develop it so that the data fetch still happens with one kind of overall login, but then each individual user will, when they actually drill down to the server, they're actually going to use their own credentials to log into XI and so forth. So that way it will still be suitable for users who want to, maybe not necessarily top administrators. Other users can use Fusion as well, and then when they log into XI, it will be their user login, not a global one. So. And then if I can get around to it, creating a developer documentation. There's a lot of really nice hooks in Fusion that you can actually just write your own custom component. So if you actually want to somehow bring data from whatever data it is, if we don't have a component for it, from XI or Core, there's adding a new thing to the poller to cache locally isn't actually terribly difficult. And particularly if you're using XI, some of the XI dashlets, adding like the host group and service group dashlets in Fusion took me about 2 hours to do. So it's pretty, there's enough tools built into it if you have people who are development savvy, particularly with PHP, and you need custom components in Fusion, they're actually fairly quick to develop. So, and then at some point, I'd like to make use of the passive polling interval and actually gather statistics for each Nagios server, again, so you can just watch the health of those over time to make sure that you don't have trending problems on your actual Nagios servers. So. All right, so as I mentioned, Fusion really is my favorite project to work on, and I think it's pretty awesome, and I think everybody should use it, or at least try it out and see if it meets your need. It's a really easy solution for distributed monitoring. In every environment needs something different. It might not be what you need, but it might be what you need. And so I encourage you guys to check it out. It has a free 60-day trial that's fully functional, so you can download a pre-installed VM or or a manual installer and try it out for 60 days and see if it's something you guys might need in your environment. So, it's also being a visualization guy, from people I've talked to, it's a pretty easy to sell to management too, because they tend to love charts and graphs and visualizations, things like that. So it's got a lot of eye candy with it too. So, but I want to kind of open it up for questions and see if you guys had any questions related to Fusion or distributed monitoring or so forth.
So I'd actually like to ask more along lines with the BPI process within Fusion.
Sure.
Have you thought about possibly taking Fusion as a roll-up mechanism for BPIs across different XI servers and maybe checking the health, even though it's not core competency is monitoring, but
Right.
to actually monitor the health of the BPIs? As we have instances where I have a Nagios server dedicated to database and
Yep.
one dedicated to web, but I would like to know if the database relates to the web to actually roll up the BPI to the top.
Yeah, and again, it's for a lot of features. It's that is definitely possible, and you're now the second person to ask for it, which puts it and it's one of those things that was in the back of my mind and had a feeling sooner or later somebody's going to ask for it, and so it just kind of comes one of those things where the more people ask for something, the higher it tends to get bumped up on a priority list, and so and that's definitely something I've thought about. Just haven't gotten around to developing it yet, but it's very, very possible, and I might have to do a couple tweaks to well, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, very possible. We'll put it that way, and definitely could be done down the road. So.
Could you quickly explain? I don't even know the term BPI. Is that an XI?
Yeah, and it's actually Nagios Business Process Intelligence. It's a way to group hosts and services together to make up a business process. And so it would basically be like monitoring an entire group state. And so if you've got, for example, a web application that the services that make that up are database backend and Apache web server and HTTP page content, all of those things are different aspects of a business process. You can put them together and monitor that entire process by setting a health threshold and also defining like essential members. So you create rules for your business process, and then you actually monitor the entire group as a single business process. So
I have two other questions related to the dashboards.
Yeah.
For your administrative supported and push dashboards, can you lock it so that a client can't alter it and ensure that a certain group always sees the same view?
Yeah, and we actually ported that feature over from XI, and I don't actually know off the top of my head the mechanics of how it syncs, but you can check it to have it always sync so that it will. I'm not sure if it's locked or if it just continues to resync with whatever the administrator has. And so I know it syncs on a regular basis. I don't know how often and how it actually works underneath the hood. So,
second dashboard question has to do with if I'm using just core and I don't have any BPI definitions, I would probably tend to set up dashboards tied to certain host groups to get us. Is that available, or is that an XI restriction only?
Currently, the host groups and service groups are an XI specific dashlet right now, and it could be ported from core as well. We'd probably want to cache that data. So it's a little bit more work to do it for core than it is for XI, because XI literally has just an API call where I can say, give me all the host status for this host group. Whereas in core, you actually have to grab the content off the page and work with it. It's a little bit more work, but it can also be done for core. We just haven't gotten to it yet. So,
okay,
but yeah. So
you.
right now it's an XI specific feature. So.
Any other questions here?
Does it integrate with Active Directory?
Yes, actually, as of about 2 weeks ago. Somebody requested that. Now, it's a basic implementation for integrating with Active Directory, so you do have to create the same usernames in Fusion, but then you basically just point it to your domain controller, and so then when somebody logs into Fusion, it basically just authenticates against Active Directory instead of against Fusion. So.
And second question, how about groups, Active Directory groups?
It doesn't do that at this time. So, and we've had that question for XI as well, so that's something that we need to get around to sooner or later, because multiple people have asked for that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, we still have some time here. Anybody else have any other questions? Do you have anything you're currently working on? Any upcoming projects?
I just cracked open the Knox Center component this last week before the conference here. I've been doing some work for the 1.3 release, which will be coming out. I did a couple of modifications to improve page load times. There's some things where it was essentially authenticating against XI servers more than it needed to, which just slowed things down a little bit. So I think if anybody is using a current version of Fusion, the 1.3 version, you're going to notice it's going to load actually all the dashlets, they're going to load a lot faster actually. So.
I really like the JavaScript library that you guys chose for the visualization widgets. Is it commercial?
It's the library that we used is the HighCharts library. It's from highcharts.com, and it's by developer license. So it's free for personal and non-commercial use, and then you just have to buy a developer license if you're going to use it for a commercial project. So it's by developer. So if you have one developer working on it, you just need one developer license. So.
Did you guys choose it like? Did you look at like an F plot or anything like that, or?
You know, I did some research, and this was actually back when we were looking for maybe a nicer looking graph than say than the RD tool graphs for XI, because we thought it's there are nicer looking tools out there. It might be nice to have something that was a little bit splashier and maybe more interactive. And so just from searching through the different libraries, the one that kind of came up as probably the best one was the HighCharts library, and I really like it because it really isn't difficult to use. Like they've got a really good developer API and really good documentation on how to develop with it, and so I definitely don't take credit for the graphs looking as nice as they do. That's the HighCharts team for sure. They made all the interaction, things like that. That's all basically built into the API of it. So you just pass it some flags and say, I want this performance graph to be zoomable, and you just pass it a flag, and then next thing you know, you can zoom and rescale the graph. So it's a pretty nice tool set to work with. So.
Somebody else may have already asked this, and I wasn't paying attention. But do you guys have any plans to do like group problem acknowledgments from Fusion, like back down to the children?
It has occurred to us, and we actually want to. I suppose some of that does exist in XI right now. We want to kind of flesh some of that out on like the XI side of things and have a nice, consistent way to do it. But there isn't any reason why we couldn't do that in Fusion. And so again, doesn't necessarily exist. Probably doesn't exist because that's the first time I've heard somebody actually ask for it. So. But yeah, it could definitely be in here. So.
All right, well, if anybody doesn't have any more questions for Mike, I guess we can wrap it up here. But give him a big round of applause. Thank you all for coming out.